Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
How are you doing?
Good.
Ezra, it looks like Michael Jackson with that hat on. The real Michael Jackson. Alright. You look like a zebra in your sweater. It's a zebra print. Good to see everybody here. Anybody know where we're at?
Bean station.
In the Bible? We are in Bean Station. Amos where? Jenny knows. At least somebody's with me. Alright. So, as always, we'll recap Amos 1. It's Old Testament. I don't do a whole lot of Old Testament as, we're still kind of trying to master the New Testament and everything, but it is good to go back because it kind of gives you a lot of warnings that you can apply to today. And as we found out last week, everybody's getting warned. Like Amos has just had it with the whole region and everything. And not only Amos, but Amos is saying he's speaking on behalf of God who's had it with everybody. So we know they've had it with everybody. He's listed their transgressions. So to recap, we'll go through a couple of those. But who was Amos? So the name translates to burden bearer. So he's the one that has to go around yelling at everybody. He's the one that has to see all the problems and not take part in all the things that they say were good or the easy times. He was an illegitimate prophet. Remember that because it'll come into play a little bit later on. And he was a herdsman of Tekoa, so he herded sheep, goats and everything. And he also picked and trimmed fig trees. So the time of activity, 760 to 755, they just state that because he says 2 years before the earthquake. This could have been a little bit before, this could have been a little bit after, as the dates have shifted a little bit then. But we know it was a while before Jesus came. And just because Jesus wasn't here yet, he was coming, and it doesn't mean that everything was perfect before then. It doesn't mean everything was super bad before then, or that God wasn't working, because God was still getting angry at everybody even before Jesus. So here we go about Tekoa. It's kind of give you an idea of the landscape, how everything looked. It's a desert, but not like sands of the Sahara Desert. It's more just empty and vast. And that's where it fits on the global scale of everything, kind of in today. Jerusalem, West Bank. And this is today's map. So if you're looking at it today, where would it be? It's right there. So the words of Amos, who was among the herdmen of Tekoa, which he saw concerning Israel in the days of Uzziah, king of Judah, and in the days of Jeroboam, the son of Joash, king of Israel. So it was actually Jeroboam 2. There's a second, we'll get in a little bit longer later on, 2 years before the earthquake. And he said, the Lord will roar from Zion and utter his voice from Jerusalem. And the habitations of the shepherds shall mourn, and the top of Carmel shall wither. So he's telling them, hey, something's coming, something big from God. So back in the day, we had Israel and Judah kind of split up. So in 2 Kings and a little bit, some of the other chapters, they were taking over this land. The Jews were, God sent them there into the land to take over. Well, after they took over a little bit, the two kings that we just talked about, Jeroboam and that other weird one to pronounce, they kind of split. So they're on the same team still. They don't hate each other, but they split power from it. And as you can see, the top part's controlled by Israel on this side. The bottom part down here is controlled by Judah, even though it's still same day, all will be Israel now. So, and there's Mount Carmel. Everybody remember what happened on Mount Carmel, right? A bunch of stuff. But this guy, Elijah, you remember what he did? Remember all the other people? The fiery altar that was set on water and everything. So he kind of painted the mountain red, if you will, sort of, with the blood of about 400 and something, did it say? The priest of Baal. So a lot of crazy stuff happened biblically on this mountain throughout every time we went. But Carmel shall wither and go away, because it was a pretty prosperous place during this time. So Jeroboam II and Uzziah. This is kind of how their kingdoms were controlled, how their kingdoms were split. So they just taken over, and in means of a leader, they weren't bad leaders. They were the ones that came in and kicked out everybody. They took over a lot of people and took the land back for the Hebrews at the time. So Jeroboam was a great warlord. His nation was prosperous, had a lot of money. Uzziah, the same thing. He was powerful enough to team up with Jeroboam or to split from him and still keep control. So they weren't suffering as a nation right now. They were, for the first time in a while, they were prospering. They had a lot of money, had some friends. There weren't a whole lot of war going on. But in their surfeiting, they got lazy with their worship and lazy with God and started doing things that God didn't necessarily want them to do. And we'll go into that. So for 3 transgressions of Damascus, and for 4 I will not turn away, because they have threshed Gilead with threshing instruments of iron. So they did some wrong to Gilead, and Amos and God were tired of it. For 3 transgressions of Gaza, and for 4 I will not turn away, because they carried away captive the whole captivity to deliver them to Edom. Edom down here. For 3 transgressions of Tyrus, and for 4 I will not turn away, because they delivered up the whole captivity to Edom, and remembered not the brotherly covenant. So they had a brotherly covenant with some people, and still led them into captivity, traded them off. For 3 transgressions of Edom, for 4 I will not turn away, because he did pursue his brother with the sword, and did cast off all pity, and his anger did tear perpetually, and he kept his wrath forever. So Edom was mad at something that happened, and he stayed mad. The sun went down on his wrath, so he's going to be punished for that. For 3 transgressions of Ammon, and for 4 I will not turn away, because they have ripped up the women with child of Gilead, that they might enlarge their borders. So they're just killing people to expand their land. For 3 transgressions of Moab, and for 4 I will not turn away, because he burned the bones of the king of Edom into lime. So with all of those, we're kind of painting a picture, kind of narrowing it down, drawing them in, boxing them in. So, looks like who is next, right? Judah and Israel. Now we're getting to the main culprits of all of this in Amos's sermons and poems. And that's where we'll start today. So, thus saith the Lord, for 3 transgressions of Judah, and for 4 I will not turn away the punishment thereof, because they have despised the law of the Lord, and have not kept his commandments. And their lies caused them to err, after the which their fathers have walked. So these people in Jerusalem and Judah and Israel are the same people that were delivered from Egypt, that were lost in the wilderness, took over the land from the Canaanites and all these people. Finally, they made it back to Israel, to the promised land, or made it to Israel, the promised land. But when they got there, they're like, all right, God, thanks. We'll take it from here. And the error started to happen. But I will send a fire upon Judah, and it will devour the palaces of Jerusalem. So, in the accusations of the nations, as this has been led to be called over the years, for 3 transgressions of Judah, and for 4 I will not turn away, because they have despised the law of the Lord, and have not kept his commandments, and their lies cause them to err, after the which their fathers have walked. So thus saith the Lord, for 3 transgressions of Israel, and for 4 I will not turn away the punishment thereof, because they sold the righteous for silver, and the poor for a pair of shoes. So now, slavery. They brought back slavery, but not just any kind of slavery. And we'll get into that a little bit later too. So, 3 transgressions of Israel, for 4 I will not turn away, because they sold the righteous for silver, and the poor for a pair of shoes. So now we've got all the area. All the cities have been called out now, and now we figure out why. So, in Leviticus 19, thou shalt not hate thy brother in thine heart. Thou shalt in any wise rebuke thy neighbor, and not suffer sin upon him. Thou shalt not avenge, nor bear any grudge against the children of thy people, but thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. I am the Lord. This is where it comes from. Back in Leviticus was the first time this was kind of brought up. So in Matthew 7, therefore all things whatsoever you would that men should do to you, do ye even so to them. For this is the law and the prophets. So the golden rule is what it's been come from. So this is Jesus talking. I didn't put that in red, but it was Jesus. And that comes from the prophets from Leviticus, the ones saying it. So it goes on to say, and when he had begun to reckon, one was brought unto him, which owed him 10,000 talents. Anybody remember this story? Matthew 18. The servant. If there's one thing God does not like, it is hypocrisy And they're really good at doing stuff like that. Like if God will say one thing, they'll do another, or they'll say one thing is from God, and then they'll turn and do the opposite. You see this all the time throughout the Bible. People taking the law one way and saying it another way to benefit them as opposed to glory or benefit God. So Peter was asking Jesus here some questions, and Jesus answered about it. And when he had begun to reckon, one was brought unto him which owed him 10,000 talents. So master sitting around started analyzing or studying his servants, and one was found to be in a lot of debt to him. But for as much as he had not to pay, his Lord commanded him to be sold, and his wife and children, and all that he had, and payment to be made. The servant therefore fell down and worshipped him, saying, Lord, have patience with me, and I will pay thee all. And the Lord of that servant was moved with compassion, and loosed him, and forgave him the debt. So here we had a servant owed a master a lot of money. Think about somebody owes you a lot of money, and then you forgive them. You're like, you know what? That's okay. Like, you're good. I get it. But the same servant went out and found one of his fellow servants, which owed him 100 pence. And he laid hands on him, took him by the throat, so probably pushing him against water, something, a pretty violent act, saying, Pay me that thou owest. And his fellow servant fell down at his feet and besought him, saying, Have patience with me, and I will pay thee all. And he would not, but went and cast him into prison till he should pay the debt. So here we have somebody that just got forgiven of a debt, went out, didn't forgive someone of their debt. Beat him up a little bit, actually, and then threw him into prison. So when the fellow servants saw what was done, they were very sorry, and came and told unto their Lord all that was done. Then his Lord, after that he had called him, said unto him, O thou wicked servant, I forgave thee all that debt, because thou desiredest me. Shouldest not thou also have compassion on thy fellow servant, even as I had pity on thee? And his Lord was wroth, and delivered him to the tormentors, till he should pay that was due unto him. So here we had a guy who was forgiven, but then he didn't forgive, so his Lord or master didn't forgive him. Found out about it and was like, well, you had your chance, and then you went and did evil, so now I'm going to do the evil back to you. Kind of the same thing that was happening right here with all of their slavery. And God even calls that out here a little bit later on. And the poor for a pair of shoes, that pan after the dust of the earth on the head of the poor, and turn aside the way of the meek. And a man and his father will go unto the same maid to profane thy holy name. Everybody know what that means? Some more ungodly stuff. It means a father would go in with a maid or a servant woman or a widow or just a maid at the temple, and then send his son to the same woman. God wasn't really cool with that. I wouldn't be cool with that either. It'd be kind of weird. So, and they lay themselves down upon clothes laid to pledge by every altar, and they drink the wine of the condemned in the house of their God. So, back to Exodus, where they get this from. If thou lend money to any of my people that is poor by thee, thou shalt not be to him as an usurer, neither shalt thou lay upon him usury. Everybody knows what usury is, right? So it's debt. If I give you $20, well, you're going to have to pay me back $30, or it's going to go up by 10 every month until I'm paid off in full or something like that. Any way debt can work, and that's why debt's kind of evil. They're kind of the only people that would do that. So Romans, everywhere else in history, they had no idea what this was until they were introduced to Hebrews or the Jewish people. And they were like, well, you mean you give somebody $20 and then they give you back more? Well, where does that money come from? And they all called it evil. They were like, whoa, this isn't happening here because that's the most evil. They were literally cutting people's heads off, crucifying people. They heard of usury and they're like, whoa, no, we ain't that evil. We ain't that bad. So it was a pretty bad thing, but even they had laws in between doing it to themselves. And if thou at all take thy neighbor's raiment to pledge, thou shalt deliver it unto him by that the sun goeth down. For that is his covering only. It is his raiment for his skin, wherein shall he sleep. And it shall come to pass when he crieth unto me that I will hear, for I am gracious. So this is like kind of where you get a pawn from. Anybody know what pawn shops, know how the pawn system works? Like, I'll give you something, you give me some money for it, I'll pay that money back, give me the item back. So back then when they were poor, they would kind of do this with their clothes or their shirts and everything. They would give them the raiment, they would take the raiment, give them money, and then here it's more talking like, look, if he's going to freeze to death at the end of the day after he's been out working trying to get the money, give him it back so he can sleep in at night and not freeze as his only clothes, And then in the morning, he'll take it back again until he eventually pays it off and gets to keep it. You don't charge him like socks and stuff too now because you have his raiment. So that was really bad to do even to their own people. And that's kind of what they were doing now. So that's where we get a lot of the debt is bad from in the Bible, because it is bad. It's a very evil thing. So modern slaves are not in chains, they are in debt. Just because you can go to your house every night, you don't have a master whipping you and controlling every part of your life, doesn't mean that you don't have a master and he's not controlling every part of your life. You have bills to pay, you have debts to pay off for your house, for your cars, for everything like that, for school, student debt. You aren't free until you're free of that, because if you stop working, how are you going to pay that off? So you have to work. Just like slaves, you had to work. You couldn't just take a day off. You can't do all this. You actually have to be there. There was a million evil things done in the Bible. Only one did Jesus flip out and flip tables and start whipping people for. That was for usury. That was exchange rate in the temples. You give me 2 of your money, I'll give you like 1 of mine. Mess with the exchange rate a little bit, because ours is the only one that's accepted in the temple. Jesus didn't like that. Jesus didn't like that all through that. And it's still a very dangerous game to play even today. So now you guys have to help me out a little bit. Because judging by what I just said and everything like that with the raiment, verse 8 says, "And they laid themselves down upon clothes laid to be pledged by every altar." That's what we just covered. "And they drink the wine of the condemned in the house of their God." So we also know around this time, they were with their conquered people who didn't worship God. They worshiped their own gods, their own images, their own temples. And there was kind of an intermingling. Like, oh, well, you can worship your God in our temple, that's fine. And, oh, you can do the same things that we're doing here just with your God and all of that. God didn't like that very much. So here when it says, drink the wine of the condemned in the house of their God, it kind of boiled down to 2 options. One, does it mean drink wine acquired via the usury from their own brethren and drink it in their own temple, which would be like Gary owing me some money, and then I take what he owes me and I drink here in his own church in front of him, which would be pretty messed up, kind of weird. Or option 2 is drink the wine of pagans in the house of the pagans from the money taken from the other ones. I'm leaning 2, but one kind of, I don't know. What do you guys think? Think number 2? What do you think in the back?
One basically is saying, like, participate, do the exact same thing that people who are already condemned were doing.
Meaning they were not worshiping God. They were kind of the pagan stuff. What do you think, Eric? Yeah.
Option 3.
So, yeah, option 3 would be they're both wrong, and I'm just missing the point. But, so it says, laid down upon clothes laid the pledge by the altar. If you keep going, it's talking about the same thing, and they drank wine of the condemned in the house of their God. But if it's 2 separate things, it would have to be option 2, and I couldn't really figure out which way. This is one of those things you look up on the internet too, and like everybody's kind of like either his side, this side, right here, and then some are like way out there, some are like aliens, like, aliens, what are you talking about? So, yeah. Those are 2 I came with though. Either way, they were drinking wine with condemned, so we know that's not good. In the house of their God, whether it be a pagan or whether it be drinking the wine of their brothers' money contained through, what's it called, filthy lucre, inside their own temple. Both are very bad options. Yet destroyed I, and this is where God's saying, don't be a hypocrite. So they're doing all this stuff, and God said, yet destroyed I the Amorite before them, whose height was like the height of the cedars, and he was strong as the oaks. Yet I destroyed his fruit from above, and his roots from beneath. So this is God saying, like, look at all this evil that you're doing. Did I not deliver you from the giants that were trying to kill you and persecute you? Did I not give you the land of the giants in Canaan and all of that? Amorite would be the giants where they come from. Deuteronomy 3. So the Lord our God delivered into our hands Og also, the king of Bashan, and all his people, and we smote him until none was left to him remaining. His seed took out his roots. And he took out that time out of the hand of the 2 kings of the Amorites the land that was on this side Jordan, from the river of Arnon unto Mount Hermon. So this is them taking lands from the Amorites. All the cities of the plain, and all Gilead, and all Bashan unto Salchak and Edrei, cities of the kingdom of Og and Bashan. For only Og, king of Bashan, remained of the remnant of giants. Tall as the cedars, right? Giants. Behold, his bedstead was a bedstead of iron. Is it not in Rabbah of the children of Ammon? 9 cubits was the length thereof, and 4 cubits the breadth of it, after the cubit of a man. So everybody knows does everybody know what a cubit is? Biblically. So a cubit is from the elbow to the fingertip in some measurements. That's what it was called in here. So if you take elbow to the fingertip, some say a cubit was fingertip to fingertip. There's a lot of different ones. But cubit of a man means just a normal person. But what's the problem with that measurement? Elbow to fingertip.
People's different sizes.
Mine's probably a lot longer than Ezra's cubit or, Melody's cubit. So it might not be a big deal, and it's kind of a good measurement to just be like, oh, it was about, 2 arm lengths. But when you start getting to 9 feet of it, can turn out to be a big difference if my arm's like 4 or 5 inches longer. So 9 cubits the length thereof, and 4 cubits the breadth of it. So if 1 cubit, anywhere between 17 to 21 inches if we're going elbow to fingertip. And that breaks down to 9 cubits being about 12 to 16 feet. So his bed was 12 to 16 feet long. And for the width wise, it goes down to about 5 to 7 feet wide. So his bed was about as wide as most of ours is long. And then it was about 12 to 16 feet, which is a little taller than a basketball goal long. This is how big that giant's bed was, just to give you guys an idea of it. There's only one painting of it, but as you can see, with normal people next to the bed, I don't know if this is exactly to scale, but the pretty enormous bed made of iron for this giant. It had to be made of iron. You could have made of wood, but it took a whole lot of wood. So, pretty big place for this giant. And they were scared of him. If you remember, they sent spies and came back to Moses and were like, no, they got giants. And only like 2 people were like, no, we got it. Let's go take them out. So this is God reminding them, like, did I not deliver you from giants? Did I not kill the giants for you? Yet destroyed I the Amorite before them, height of the cedars. So they're pretty tall people. Have you ever seen a cedar tree? They're not the tallest tree, but not short either. I'd hate to fight a guy the size of a tree. Just saying. So also I brought you up from the land of Egypt, and led you 40 years through the wilderness to possess the land of Amorite. This is when they were lost around and finally got to Canaan and all of those places. And I raised up your sons for prophets, and your young men for Nazarites. Is it not even thus, O ye children of Israel, saith the Lord? So this is God reminding them, yet again, everything I've done for you. I delivered you from giants. I gave you the land of the giants. I delivered you out of Egypt. I led you through the wilderness for 40 years. And now, finally, you get the land, and this is what you're doing with it. So, Egypt. He split the sea, led them out of Egypt. They were indentured servants. Some were slaves in Egypt. It's kind of weird when you start looking at the history of how it was. Some of them did it to themselves. Some of them were born into it after the years. They kind of got enslaved over generations. But God delivered them out of that. Slavery. Delivered them from slavery. But ye gave the Nazarites wine to drink, and commanded the prophets, saying, prophesy not. So what is the problem with all of this? So Numbers 6, speaking to the children of Israel, and saying to them, when either man or woman shall separate themselves, to vow a vow of a Nazarite, to separate themselves unto the Lord, meaning I'm kind of like a monk or a nun, I'm going to separate, I'm going to become a Nazarite. He shall separate himself from wine and strong drink, and shall drink no vinegar of wine or vinegar of strong drink. Neither shall he drink any liquor of grapes, nor eat moist grapes or dry. All the days of his separation shall he eat nothing that is made of the vine of the tree, from the kernels even to the husk. So what did they do? They gave the Nazarites wine. One thing they were doing bad is to make them mad. Oh, you're super separate from God. But we don't care anymore. God finally gave us the land. Now you can sit back and drink some a little bit. And commanded the prophets, saying, prophesy not. So there's like, hey, I think a lot of weird stuff's going to happen. No. We're good. Everything's going smooth right now. Then you have Amos going over here just screaming at him, telling them that they better turn back. God's getting mad at him, and they're kicking him out every time he comes back. So he's a shepherd back here. So he's kind of getting upset, right? So, behold, I am pressed under you as a cart is pressed that is full of sheaves. So, anybody ever seen a cart like this back in the day, pulling by a donkey? Full of sheaves just means like cut wheat, cut grass, or big stuff. So this one tripped me up for some reason. It's very simple, I don't know why. But God is pressed under you. This is God saying, behold, I am pressed under you as a cart is pressed that is full of sheaves. God has done so much for these people, for the Israelites, delivered them from the things that he just mentioned. Was it not I that did this for you? Did not I deliver you from slavery? And then you turn around and start enslaving your own people for silver. You started using usury and debt to enslave them and sell them off to Edom and places. You started giving my holy people wine to drink and making them break their promises. You started giving the people that I gave a gift to, you started silencing them, telling them to not say this, to shut up. So I'm pressed under you as a cart that is full of sheaves. Like, they're starting to be a hard people to love for God. So I'm like, look, you're doing everything I'm saying not to, and I've carried you all this way. You're starting to get a little burdensome, starting to get a little heavy, and it's starting to make me kind of mad. I'm God, I'm not, a donkey carrying this heavy cart. At any time, I can turn you back. And that's what Amos said is about to happen. So therefore, the flight shall perish from the swift, and the strong shall not strengthen his force, neither shall the mighty deliver himself. So if you're fast and you're quick, you're not going to be fast and quick enough. If you're strong and mighty, you're not going to be strong and mighty enough, because something's coming. Neither shall he stand that handleth the bow, and he that is swift of foot shall not deliver himself. Neither shall he that rideth the horse deliver himself. So, if you try to fight me from a distance, that's not going to work either. If you try to turn and run, you're not going to make it. Even if you use a horse, you're not escaping this, what's coming to you, because God's had enough, and this is Amos telling them that. And he that is courageous among the mighty shall flee away naked in that day, saith the Lord. So even if you're courageous, even if you have, you've been through battles, you're battle hardened, as a lot of these rulers and a lot of these men were at that time, because they just came through the wilderness and taken over a new place finally, it's not going to be enough. This is Amos saying something big, something great is coming that none of you are going to be able to withstand, and that's because of you doing exactly what God delivered you from to other people. Hypocrisy of the slavery, of the war, of all of this. So strong, quick, all these people, they're not going to get away from what's coming. So guess what's coming? Find out next week on Amos 3. Yeah. Any questions about any of that?
No.
No questions from Ezra.